Welcome to Gerry's Open Metaverse, where I provide regular updates, intel and alpha on the... Okay guys, just another live stream to dive into all things Mintage. I've had a few friends in private chats with a few concerns around the project and not fully understanding the value proposition of it, and with some questions around how certain parts of it worked. So I thought I'd basically bring up a few tabs to show you my understanding of the project, and just to let you guys help have a bit more of an informed opinion. So in case you're a holder and you're thinking of selling, or if you're looking to take a position yourself, because it has been a little bit of a rocky start in terms of the price action for this project, and I've got some thoughts on why that is. So let's dive into things. Having a look at the Mintage pricing at the moment, the floor price of the actual passes, the day one passes, has dropped to about 2.6 ETH, which is well down from the 0.5 ETH mint cost. But you've got to factor in that the holders of the mint pass essentially received a free Sean Wotherspoon trunk, which was basically in the Genesis collection, if you like, the very first drop that you were able to get. Now, people from the public who didn't hold a pass could mint one of these for, I think it was 0.197 ETH. So, they're down 50% from that, which is not really surprising because you've had 1,500 pass holders get airdropped one of these at no additional cost, and they're probably trying to get some return on investment from that 0.5 ETH. And as you can see, it's basically been a downward slide since the first few days after the mint price. It did actually do really well in the first 48 hours. A lot of them were selling for up to sort of 0.7 ETH. But that was, pretty good timing with a bit of an uptick in momentum in the broader market. But the one thing I've found with NFT collections at the moment in this bear market, it's super important that you keep your community engaged and make sure that they are well informed and feel like they're a part of something, because there's no new entrants coming into the space at the moment. Let's be honest. It's the same money moving around in circles, basically chasing the next sort of hype and hoping to get a bit of a momentum trade happening. So if you're a loyal holder, you need to be showing that there's a good use case coming up. Otherwise, there's an opportunity cost involved in holding a collection when there's a good chance you could probably just get out early, maybe even make some money, and then come back in later once it's got a bit more of a proven track record. So I think the Mintage team have done a lot of things well, but there's areas for improvement as well. So the main one being the community engagement, direct with the community. Now, they've been really busy with their Fashion Fun in the Future Twitter spaces with some really high profile guests, but that's at arm's length from the community. That's not really engaging your community directly. It's still good marketing, and it's great to get the project on more people's radars by having these big names like Tim Ferriss and Beeple and the likes like that. But if they're not really directly engaging with their community in the Discords, that's where your Web3 community is, especially in these bear markets. So that's an area I think they can improve on. So the other part of the collection are the bales. So the Friends and Fam, which is a limited set of holders of the passes. There's only 100 of those. And if you look at the prices of these are really holding their ground really well, because again, there's only 100 of them. Those guys got airdropped a bale. Now, we don't know what's in the bale, but I suspect it's probably could include a few things, but I'd say there's a really good chance it has a physical element to it. So there's possibly some physical items, Mintage items, that you will receive, or maybe get an NFT that is redeemable for the physical. I kind of hope that's the model they go for. I think they're still working those details out. So another popular digital collectible and physical offering is from G Money, and it's 9DCC, where they've got some chips embedded into their clothing, and that opens up a whole new set of use cases. But the actual items, NFTs first and foremost, that are tradable in the secondary market before you can redeem them for the physicals, I believe. And that item of clothing is held in a vault until you redeem it. So if they go with a similar model like that, I think that's a really good way to go about it, especially longer term. And if you think about it, a lot of these clothings are coming out of Sean Wotherspoon's private warehouse anyway. So in essence, they are kind of vaulted. As long as that is a secure facility, and I'm sure it would be given the value of the items that are already in there as part of Sean's collection. I think that might be a really good way to go moving forward because there's a few reasons for it. A lot of these clothes, especially the rarer ones, people might not actually want to wear. They might not even fit their body shape, for instance, yet they're valuable and highly coveted. So being able to own it and have that upside from it and maybe even use it as collateral to unlock DeFi applications, that sort of thing down the track, that's really useful. Furthermore, it's much easier to sell it and trade it later on. And that also drives secondary market, which Mintage can accrue some more value in royalties from, which gives them more funding to do good things down the track. So I think that's a really good model. So that's one aspect of it. Now, if you want to have a look at some of the examples of what the physicals could look like, probably this is another point about where I think Mintage could do better is their communications have been really disjointed, and you really need to be following each and every founder through all of their social channels to find all these breadcrumbs, which I'm bringing up. So this is a pretty good example, I think, of what you can expect from, this is from Brennan, one of the three co-founders. So he used to work with Adidas and has dealt with Nick and Snoop and these guys in the past. Looks like there's a good chance that this particular Levi denim jacket will end up being branded as Mintage, possibly with some badges, maybe some particular embroidery, or just some stamping on there as well. So another example of something similar. Obviously, this will be a bit of a lower value item and possibly just a proof of concept. But this is the sort of thing you can see that Nick's indicating they're going for. Basically, rebranding retro tees that they've found along the way and branding them as Mintage, and either having that as an option for someone to buy on what they're calling the Mintage market, which is their marketplace they're going to be spinning up on their website, or having maybe a selection of the pass holders will get these as an airdrop. Hopefully everything doesn't just funnel to the friends and fam, because they really need to protect the rest of the holders and give them some upside as well. So hopefully that's one element. And maybe, these lower value items, we're probably not going to get the vaulting type arrangement. That will be interesting to see. Maybe they do, who knows? So that's another example of the physical. If you have a look at the Mintage website, this gives you an idea of the Mintage market that's coming. So holders will have sort of priority access to get into this. And I think the concept is that, if there's a limited run of stuff, people might want to buy it and then try their hand at reselling it potentially themselves, because this is how the sneaker culture works and the vintage collectible culture works. It's a lot through secondary sales. And as you've seen from the rise of StockX, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry now. And while on the topic of StockX, Aaron McDonald, the founder, co-founder of the Futureverse, who are helping to back out Mintage with the tech, mentioned that StockX is behind Mintage. Now, that's not advertised anywhere else. That'll probably come out later on in further media. But I think you can expect over time to see digital collectibles and some of the physicals pop up as featured collections on StockX. Now, why I think this is significant for the Futureverse and really smart with the way that they're setting things up is this is another funnel to get people onto their underlying infrastructure. So if you're not too familiar with how all of that works, check out some of my other videos. My Futureverse Flywheel one, which I did about a month ago, is a pretty good starting point. But basically, there's an entire tech stack, a Web3 tech stack that these guys have been building for years. And using Web2 interfaces to onboard people to the Web3 rails is how they're going about broadening the market to the mainstream, to normies, to people who have no crypto assets, no wallets, no NFTs. And this is a smart way to help do that. So I think you'll find that that's a big part of Mintage, is by integrating some of it into traditional marketplaces like StockX. So that's one to watch. The other thing is these aren't just digital clothing that you can dress your avatars with. This is a good example of the value add, or how they're bringing the vintage clothing into a digital realm where it makes more sense in that setting. So I don't think you can hear the audio that I'm hearing over the top of this. But this is just an example of what happens when you apply an ink to one of the garments. So it goes in, I'll let that run in the background. You can see it adds, basically a whole new dimension to the asset, which is quite cool. And sort of, this is a bit of speculation on my part, but the non-fungible labs guys are behind all this stuff and all the wallet tech and, everything that happened with the mint. So those are the guys behind Fluff World and the Futureverse. And you can start to see other sides to it where this full looks like full 3D environments potentially behind some of this. So don't be shocked to find that these ink types are actually going to be a 3D setting in part of the Futureverse tech stack. With the fluffs and the party bears, you've got the scenes and sounds collection, which if we dive into the underground here, which is where you can see all the fluff world assets, some of these are already 3D environments if we drill into these. So this Mystic Valley one from Nache, it's a bit hard to see, so small. But this is a 3D environment that you'll be able to run around in with your avatars. It makes up part of what they're calling the third kingdom, which is going to be an immersive environment, an open world, multi-player environment, sort of like World of Warcraft. That's what they're going for over time. And it does feature in the Fluff World trailer. I've got that in one of my tabs here. So if we have a look at this, you can see a bit more of it and what I'm talking about, where the avatars are running around in a 3D setting. There's the party bears, and you'll see the flufflets, which are the offspring of the fluffs, in that Mystic Valley setting. And they're even going under the water for a bit of a swim, and looks like there's some treasure under there. So there's going to be all sorts of gamification around these environments. And I suspect there's a great chance that these are some of the environments we may end up seeing. So there's 3 ink types that come in your trunk that you can apply to your garment. So there's a mushroom one, a Venus flytrap, and it looks like maybe a flower related one. And they're all going to do different things to your garment. And basically you're sort of basically burning both the original garment and the ink to create a new one. So that's going to be like the first implementation of some of the utility you can expect to see, but don't be shocked to see some of these spring up potentially as a scene or a sound or a digital environment that you can explore later on. So that could be quite cool and quite interesting. Here's an example of the obvious utility that you'll get, and this will be happening sooner than people think, I suspect. So this is, the Sean Wotherspoon jacket that they've shown that's in the trunk, and it's applied to a fluff and to a party bear. And these guys obviously have totally different body shapes, but you can see how cool they look. Now, one of the criticisms that some friends had about MNTGE was they thought when they bought the trunk that they were getting just the jacket. They didn't realize it was one of 4 different items of clothing. So if you really bought the trunk because you wanted the jacket, you might not get it. So that's one downside potentially, if that was your perspective. But the other way of looking at it is, hey, cool, who knows what's in the trunk? Then there's the rarity game that we all play with NFTs, and that plays into it as well. So just to confirm, in the trunk is one of 4 different items of clothing, digital clothing, and one of 3 ink types. And I suspect everything in the trunk is going to be digital only. Obviously, Sean Wotherspoon's not going to give away some of his one-of-one pieces as part of this. And that's where the bales might come in with some of the physicals. And I have a strong suspicion that those bales will actually be holding these jeans, if I can find them. So it may be some of these are a combination of, but these Sean Wotherspoon jeans, Sean was going to actually sell these, I think in 3 different locations around the world. And they're basically, vintage and retro Levi's that he's rebranded or badged with his own embroidery, with own fruit and veggie embroidery, and his signature SW. But he pulled them once he knew where MNTGE was going, and these have been reserved only for MNTGE. So whether these are sold or airdropped to bale holders or pass holders, maybe a combination of the both. Perhaps some are set aside for people to actually buy. So that's my gut take, that's probably what's happening with the bales. Now, I don't know about you. Personally, I wouldn't be paying $1,000 for these jeans. So just keep that in mind. Each to their own. These things are collectible, and it depends on what you're trying to do here. But just keep that in mind that there's still a lot of unknowns here as to what's in these bales and even what's in the trunks. I could be off the mark here. The other thing that I think might be happening, I think there's a video that might show it in the background. If I can find the right tab. This one here. So they're talking about tie-dye shirts versus camo shirts. Now we know that one of the 4 items of clothing in the trunks is a digital shirt. It could be these could be a sneak peek. But what I think is really interesting in this video is when they go to the jacket at the end that's covered in badges. So we'll just wait for that to come up in a second. I think we'll find that badges are digital accessories that you can apply to your garments and maybe even garments and move them around. So Nikki actually mentioned in one of the Twitter spaces he was on, if I can just find the trunk itself. There's the trunk. It's probably a little bit hard to see, but you've got the badges, some of these badges stuck on here. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if those badges, maybe we can customize our clothing just to make it a little more individual. So you've got the jacket or the jeans, and then you've got the inks. That's another way to sort of make it a little bit unique. But what if you could move around all of these badges and over time get badges from other artists, other collections, other drops, and sort of stitch them back onto your digital clothing? That would be a cool way of making them a true one-of-ones, a little bit more personalized, and I think a fun thing moving forward, because we don't really want 200 jackets that look the same. We want to have a bit of variety. So that could be one way that they're doing it. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I haven't covered that I was planning to. So there is the 4 items of clothing. So if we have a look at the MNTGE front page of MNTGE, one of their recent posts sort of cleared it up for people as to what they can expect. If I can find it here. This one here. So this might have been useful to do before they minted, because especially with the trunks. Now, I could be wrong with this one, but I'm pretty sure this has been revealed somewhat in a video in the background. And same with the jeans. So I'll just show you those. So you've got the 4 items of clothing. The jacket is clearly, everyone knows about that one. But if we have a look, I think it's on, might be this one here. There's the jeans. If we watch this video. So there's an example of the jeans, and that rainbow patch also appears on the MNTGE trunk, which makes me think we might be able to move around these badges and patches to even further customize our clothing going forward. Now, that might take a while to actually play out in terms of the utility and technically what they need to do, but I think that might be an angle that they're looking at. So that's interesting. I'll see if I can find the sweater now, because that also features in another video. Might be this one. Nope. And this is what I mean about the communications has been a little bit haphazard. Maybe it's deliberate. I'm not sure. It might be on here. There's an example of the badges. You can see a bit more clearly. Stickers and badges. Kind of looks like that's what they're going for with those. That might be customizable. This is another little, here's the sweater. We'll get to that in a second. But here's another example. Like, what's Sean doing here? He's going through physical items of clothing, taking photos of them, and then the MNTGE site is advertising that. So I think you can expect there is going to be a big physical element to this. They've got that shop front. Now, whether it's just straight vintage stuff that's sold or some of it's branded as vintage, we're not too sure. But that's just one element of it. And finally, I'll probably end up on this. I think this is the sweater that we can expect to get in our trunks. And I actually think these will look quite cool on certain avatars, so that'll be fun. It's probably a little bit, potentially, I mean, it's unisex, but it does, the color might lend itself better to some of the female avatars out there. So that'll be interesting to see as well. But that's my thoughts, guys, on mintage and where we're at. Actually, the one point I haven't made yet is we've got a long wait between now and when the last of the holders can claim their trunks. So like I said, these trunks were a free claim for any of the pass holders, and we've still got some people that haven't claimed yet. There's still quite a few. Now, if they don't claim, they end up going into the Mintage Treasury, I believe, the Mintage Vault. So they'll probably redistribute those later for marketing purposes and stuff like that. But we've got a long wait. We have until the 28th of Feb to claim these. So that's a 2-week window in a bit of a bear market. And if they don't really pump the utility in the next 2 weeks, I suspect that there'll be more downward pressure on prices, especially if we have a pullback in the broader crypto market. There already is a really big gap between the bid and the ask. That's a big spread right there. It's almost 20%. So that's not a good sign at all. The mintage bail is a bit different because it's so limited in its supply. You've only got 4 available, but again, I'm not sure I'd pay $1,000 for that. And you can see, look how far apart the bid and the ask is. It's half an ETH. So that's pretty bearish, to be honest. And the issue with this is the floor might be 0.1 or just under, but how many people start selling into these wrapped ETH offers? Realistically, the floor, there's a big gap between the demand and the actual asking price of the floor of some of these. So that's a problem. There's half an ETH there as well. So that's a big issue. I personally think one thing they could do better is at the end of their weekly spaces, which are great, why not reserve 10 minutes to pull a few people up out of the crowd and get them engaged on that level and ask them questions and be there for questions. They've done a little bit of that since the drop of the mint pass, the trunk, and I thought that was great. And then even better, at the end of your hour or hour and 20, however long it runs for, just jump back into the Discord. Hey guys, let's if you're vibing, let's kick it on into the Discord and either jump in the voice chat there where people might be less intimidated getting up on a public Twitter space to ask questions, or just be there for text chat. Now they've got 3 founders. I only need one of them to do that. That's a really simple way to drive a bit more community engagement rather than just, okay, we've had some celebrity up, talk to them for an hour and bam, that's it. See you next week. So you've really got to foster your Web3 community during these bear markets. So that's probably the biggest thing. I think they can definitely do better. I really like the project long term. I think it's got a tremendous upside if they can execute. And I do really like the concept of them being a bit of a funnel and a conduit for traditional Web2 people to get into Web3 and maybe have mintage branding, use the mintage rails and platform once it's established, use that brand reach they have into StockX. Nikki even hinted, maybe we should have a Beeple Inc. That's a brilliant way to do things. Get digital artists involved with the inks. They don't have to come from retro fashion or anything like that. The sneaker world, or vintage collectibles. They can just be pure artists that you can glamorize these digital vintage garments and keep them relevant in a modern setting. So I think that's a really cool avenue that they could have, is to bring on collaborations at that level. And that would be really interesting. I do think that the ink thing makes this so much more than just physical clothing with some NFT blockchain ownership attached. I think there is really good potential here, but it could take a couple of years to really realize the true value. But the thing is, one of the reasons I am bullish, there's only so few of these passes. There's not many. There's only 1,500. Pretty good distribution of ownership here. So you've seen what happens with certain mint passes where the value does get, where you do get looked after as a holder, like Admit One, and the price of these can go up exponentially. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. But for me, that's potentially a pretty good gamble entry. It's not financial advice, and I have just gone through all the pros and cons, so make your own decisions. But that's my perspective. If you're willing to take a bit of a gamble on one of these passes and hold it for a couple of years, I think there's a great chance you'll get a good return on your investment. Not financial advice, of course, but yeah, that's my point of view. So anyway, guys, that went for a lot longer than I was expecting. I hope you found that useful, but that's my gut take on where Mintage is at as a project. It's got some short-term hurdles to overcome, but things can turn around pretty quickly, especially once you can see the utility that the root network and the Futureverse rails, which all of this is going to be underpinned by. Once that starts to shine through, people will start to have a bit more of a tangible understanding of what that utility looks like. And probably the last point I would make, given that the root network is about to launch and assets are going to get bridged over, I think the only way you're going to be able to use these in the short term, i.e. dressing avatars, is to migrate stuff to the root network. And that'll probably all happen in the background from a Web 2 point of view. So you'll have the Mintage website where you can, join your ink together with your garment. But I'd say in the background, it's probably doing that on the root network and maybe even bridging the asset across. And that's where the actual utility will be. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's incentivized with root tokens as another mechanism to try and bootstrap people over to the Futureverse rails and the root network. So that's kind of all I've got for today, but I hope you found that useful, and thanks very much for watching. Cheers.